Move on, and we're going to do Podluck, and this first one is from Ryan Murphy, and I found out something very interesting.
I've been looking forward to this because I watched the whole series. Go ahead.
All right, so it says, Ryan Murphy slams Netflix series for making the Dahmer show less gay. And he says, Dahmer creator Ryan Murphy is hitting back at Netflix over its decision to de-emphasize the show's connection to gay history. Quote, there was a moment in the on Netflix where they removed the LGBTQ tag from the Dahmer series, and I didn't like it, Murphy, age 56, told the New York Times, referring to the way the streamer sorts its content into categories. What's interesting about this, I did not know Ryan Murphy is gay.
What?
So,
I didn't either.
I didn't know that either.
It would have played it would have seemed, it makes his kind of interest in what it meant for the culture more prevalent to me.
Right.
So he says, the LGBTQ tag is usually used on Netflix to help viewers identify stories about queer characters, for example, Heartstopper, and that's the one that we were talking about before, or the teen lesbian vampire show First Kill. And then there was a pushback basically saying, like, we don't want Dahmer associated with LGBTQ because obviously that's a dark spot in history. But it's his quote here that I think is really important. He says, and I asked why they did that, and they said because people were upset because it was an upsetting story, Murphy said. I was like, well, yeah, but it was a story of a gay man and, more importantly, his gay victims. I think that this was a story that he felt was important to tell because it resonated with him and his identity, and he let the outrage activist class, he didn't, but Netflix allowed
Ryan Murphy didn't have, he likely didn't have a say in whether the LGBTQ tag would get kept or removed on his show.
I meant Netflix let the outrage activist class bully them into taking it off.
Netflix did what is the logical conclusion of this whole representation paradigm.
Yeah.
It means you can only represent that group on its own terms. And positively, if they demand that you erase something from representation because it makes some of them look bad, then you have to comply.
Yeah.
But it's like, if you're looking for representation in the authentic sense of the word, that will show all the good and the bad in a nuanced way. That means, look at this gay man who happened to do heinous crimes to gay victims. This is a dark spot in LGBT history, and we're showing it because people are genuinely interested in it. The show did fantastically.
And don't those victims deserve to have their stories told?
Yeah, and there's other arguments to be had about that, but that's part of real representation. It's showing the high points and low points, and not just painting everything as puppies and rainbows.
Yep. Which never comes off as authentic.
Right.
And people see right through it.
Right.
What were your thoughts?
My thoughts were that was a perfect example, probably the best I've ever seen of like where context matters, because I didn't really like that headline. Ryan Murphy didn't think it was like, I totally, without knowing that Netflix, taking it out of the LGBTQ tag, and that Ryan Murphy, who directed it, I think, is gay. Yeah. That totally makes way more sense as to why he would feel that way. So that's what I thought.
Yeah, he's married to David Miller. They have 3 children. So it clearly was a story that he felt was important to talk about.
It's also like, you can't be represented on your own terms. You actually have to be represented on the terms of a multi-billion-dollar mega corporation that decides for you what is appropriate.
Yeah. And
it gives them way too much power.
Yeah.
Right? And then it gives people on Twitter who will complain about literally anything way too much power over this corporation's response to controversy.
And it's like people respect these companies more when they don't bend the knee anyways. They tend to respect the companies more when they don't just make a change at a drop of a hat because 5 people on Twitter. It's always like 5 people, and they have like 5 followers each.
Or they're bots.
Or they're bots. And there was no reason to remove that tag from the show.
And to tie it back, that's why fan fiction is now being like pitched as like, hey, make this happen.
Yeah.
This is...
Thank you.
Oh. The removal of the LGBTQ tag is the least of the Dahmer series worries as far as drama or controversies about the show, because they were actively getting family members of victims
Right.
Also, by the way,
crying out against what they were doing.
did you see there was another article that we didn't cover because it came out while we were off, that he reached out to all the families of the victims and not one of them called him back?
Yeah, I mean, I think that should tell you something about
Yeah.
what they think, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I had only heard that they claimed that they never got a heads up.
He said that he reached out to all of them and just didn't hear back from any of them, because I'm sure all of them get messages or like
You're right, they probably get them all the
correspondence
time.
all the time from tons of people. This just happened to be the most recent one that hit the public consciousness really, really hard. Right? I'm sure they get plenty of messages from regular reporters, journalists, people doing human interest pieces or whatever.
Yeah. The sister of one of the victims actually was portrayed in the show testifying on the stand based on a real video of her doing exactly that. And I can just imagine in her position how watching yourself on a huge show that millions of people are watching in one of the most like painful moments of your life
Yeah.
seems unjust.
Talk about having to relive something.
Yeah. Yeah, and so the status of this series as LGBT or not LGBT history is really the least, or should be at least, the most superficial criticism that they've received.
Yeah. Out of
There
all
are
of it.
other arguments to be had about this show that I think are way more valid and
Like what?
and, well, that the victims' families are speaking out against it and saying that it's unethical to recreate their traumatic moments.
Do you think that is true? Do you think it's unethical to retell something that's a story that is that important to American history?
I think it's at least more of a credible argument than you're misrepresenting the LGBT community.
Yeah.
Because nobody watches the Dahmer series and comes away from it thinking, wow, I guess all gay people are murderers.
Obviously,
like
no one thinks that way.
Yeah, but only if you have some deranged mentality about how representation matters.
Yeah.
Would you think that?
Do you
know?
think? Do you think that there should be more caution put to making shows like this about real life events?
I mean, weirdly enough, they're only making these shows based on real events and true crime because they lack creativity. So it's a symptom of a larger problem.
I mean, I do agree that they're not creative. I think they make plenty of attempts at being creative and they fail miserably.
They made a whole movie about Jeffrey Dahmer already that was in 2017. That wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So it just seems like they're harping on something that's already been explored and not adding anything new to it.
It's like I kind of err on the side of the creatives when it comes to this type of stuff. Like once something becomes as big as the Jeffrey Dahmer case or Ted Bundy or anything like that, it takes on a life of its own, and it means it becomes something completely different than just the victims, unfortunately. And that there's a certain level of ascribing intent to the creatives, like that they're out to get the families or they're out to hurt people by making these things. And I don't think that's necessarily how they see the world. I think they see a story that played a huge role in our culture at a time, at a specific time, and they want to tell a story that's related to that. I don't see that as inherently a bad thing. I think how you go about it is important, and that you have to be respectful, but or you have to find a way to not be respectful. You have to find a way to tell the story authentically, and sometimes feelings will get hurt in that process because it was a traumatizing event to begin with.
Yeah, the people aren't public figures. The family members of the slain are not. And so, like, if you're upsetting them, I mean, the Alex Jones case kind of set a precedent that people that were hurt emotionally, even that were just peripherally involved, that weren't even named in the case, were able to somehow sue.
That's scary.
So I don't like that.
It's not that I think they shouldn't be allowed to make a show like this, but I think that they're drawing upon material like this from real life events because they're not capable of writing original stories.
Yeah. I mean,
that's what we've seen.
I don't know if it's necessarily that they're not capable of it. It's that these companies don't feel like they know how to market it in a way that will actually, like Dahmer captures public fascination rather than telling the same story generically with, like you could tell the exact same story as a fictional version of it, and it won't capture the imagination the same way that the real life one does.
Really? I mean, there are shows like Dexter. for example.
Yeah, but that's harder to do. I doesn't mean I don't think they don't try. I just don't think that they.
I don't doubt that it's harder to do. I'm just saying
in
they're not
Vogue-
willing to. They're not willing to go about it the hard way.
And true crime is in vogue right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, at the very least, I would like to see more portrayals of like financial crimes than things that are this viscerally disgusting.
Was there was an Enron movie made, right? I remember
Oh yeah, it's called The Smartest People in the Room.
Okay, there you go.
Okay.
The Big Short was good.
The Big
Yeah,
Short.
I've heard that too.
There's
There's a GameStop movie
Really?
coming out. That's not about financial crimes, but it's interesting.
Stonks the movie. Thanks for watching this clip, guys. If you want to see full episodes or follow us on social media, links are in the description below. Bye.
Bye.